I'll just welcome everybody and thank folks for attending our second forum for the Climate Action Plan. And we're going, I don't know how many folks were here at the first one, but the whole idea is to figure out how we're going to align, make a plan to help the entire town, not just the municipal sector, entire town align with the state's goals of achieving net zero energy by the year 2050. So let me turn things over for our presentation tonight to Cassidy Yates, who is with Weston and Sampson Engineers, our consultants.
Would it, before you do that, it would be best for you to call the meeting to order?
I can't. I'm not the chair. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order.
Well, who is? Do we have?
I think Jonathan can, but
is there?
Yeah, I think I am the backup. So yeah, I think we do have a. Actually, I'm not sure we have a quorum.
I was just going to say.
I don't believe. Hold on. I don't believe we have a quorum right now.
Okay.
No.
So
if we get one, then it's best to call it to order just for safety's sake. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for reminding us, Pete.
Yeah, feel free to interrupt me if you need to call it to order at any point during the meeting. Great. Well, thanks for the introduction, Bob. I'll advance here to the next slide. I'm Cassidy Yates. I'm a climate resiliency and sustainability engineer with Weston and Sampson. I'll be joined shortly by my colleague, Grace Rao, who's a sustainability planner, also with Weston and Sampson. And I wanted to give a shout out to the Energy Committee, some of whom are on the call today. They've been instrumental in helping us move the project forward. So today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of some basics around climate change and climate action, just to set the stage for our discussion today. We'll review the greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we did in an earlier task for this project. And then we'll also get into kind of the meat of the presentation here, which will be all of the draft actions in each of the sectors that we've come up with so far based on some community input and discussions with the committee. And then we'll leave up some time for discussion around those as well. So we're going to use a program called Slido, which you can use your cell phone for, or if you're at a computer, you can also type slido.com into a web browser. But essentially, if you scan the QR code using your phone camera, it will take you to the Slido webpage. And this will just allow us to do some live interactive polling throughout the presentation so we can get some quick feedback from you all on the actions that we're proposing. So I'll give everyone just a second. Feel free to scan the QR code. You'll see a page comes up and it'll say no active poll. And then as I move to the next slide, it will pop up with a question. And this QR code will be on the next slide as well. So I'll advance. If you go to the slido.com, you can also just type in Millis action if it asks for the code, but that too will be on the next slide. So just kind of to practice using Slido here and to understand kind of who's here with us today, we have this first question just asking if you could select all that apply. If you live in Millis, work in Millis, are a Millis business owner, or maybe live elsewhere but work here. Seeing some answers come in, great. Okay, so we'll have a few more polls throughout the presentation, but that's generally how it works. Pretty simple to just kind of click your answer. Oh, yeah, it's more, great. So we've got lots of folks that live in Millis and some people that work in Millis. Great. So the development of a climate action plan really comes from the need to take action on climate change, given the impacts we're already experiencing, including more frequent and severe storm events, so rain events and associated flooding, and all sorts of other storms that we've been experiencing here in Millis and throughout the Northeast. Extreme heat is another one of those changing climate impacts that we're also feeling, especially today. Typically, on average, we have about 8 days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit per year, but by 2070, that's expected to increase to nearly 40 days per year. So our summers are going to get much hotter. And to prevent further impacts and worsening climate change, we need to take steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's really what is included here in a climate action plan. So we're developing a comprehensive roadmap to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and better adapt to climate change. Some of the topics included in the climate action plan are energy efficiency, electrification of buildings and vehicles to reduce fossil fuel usage, mobility, so looking at alternative transportation forms like biking, walking, public transportation. And then also included in climate action plans are often natural resources. So looking at tree planting and wetland conservation to help sequester some carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. When we talk about climate actions, we try to think of them in these 3 tiers, 3 pillars of sustainability, including not just the environmental side, but also looking at social and economic considerations too, making sure that we're proposing actions that really benefit the community, and the cost is something that either if it's a municipal action, it's something that the city or the town can incur, and be cognizant of those costs that are passed on to residents as they do their part in also taking climate action. Some of the key terms that we'll use throughout the presentation include greenhouse gas emissions. So this is carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases that are released from the combustion of fossil fuels like burning natural gas or gasoline and diesel that really trap these gases, and these gases are trapped in the atmosphere and then cause the planet to warm. So that's what's leading to those long-term extreme weather shifts that we're seeing, is really this global warming effect. We'll talk about net zero emissions. So this is where we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions to the extent possible, and then any remaining emissions that might be hard to reduce from more industrial sectors or buildings or vehicles that are challenging to decarbonize. Then we're going to use natural carbon sequestration and other carbon capture technologies to achieve this net zero emissions. We talk about mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation meaning reducing greenhouse gases, and adaptation meaning adjusting to the impacts of climate change that we're already experiencing. And then resilience kind of going hand in hand with climate action and that adaptation piece. So making sure that the systems and our community can really bounce back from the impacts of climate change. So I've mentioned greenhouse gas emissions a couple times. Again, those gases are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. And these come from residential sources, commercial sources, and the municipality. In Millis in 2022, the community was responsible for emitting over 70,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And you can think about this as over 16,000 gasoline vehicles driven for 1 year. So a substantial amount, but on par with many of the neighboring communities and what we're seeing across Massachusetts. These emissions are primarily coming from transportation and stationary sources, which would be buildings, with a small portion coming from waste. And those were the 3 main categories that were assessed for emissions, although there's lots of upstream and downstream emissions and other carbon emissions like embodied carbon in all the products that we're using. But those were outside of the scope of the inventory and really here focused on transportation, buildings, and waste. The sectors that we are proposing actions for in the plan include buildings and energy, which makes sense since those are kind of that stationary energy piece, which is a large portion of the inventory, waste, natural resources, mobility. And we also have some actions that are around capacity building. So they may not have emissions reductions directly, but can lead to that and set up programs and projects to be able to do so in the future. There's also several actions that we'll talk about that have impacts in multiple sectors. So we'll start by talking through some of those multiple sector actions. So we have around 17 actions that we'll be discussing today. These are the first 3, and then the following slides will also break them up by sector. So I'll just read off kind of the first 3 here. So the first proposed action is the development of programs for education and outreach for residents and businesses. This is a very general action recognizing that the town of Millis can support residents and businesses in this transition to net zero through a variety of ways, including policy, programs, projects. So this high-level action, it kind of sets the stage for that and will provide examples in the plan of what some of those projects or policies could look like, but generally recognizing that the town needs to support residents and businesses. The second action here is to fulfill the 6 requirements of becoming a climate leader community, including adopting the specialized stretch energy code. Millis has completed almost all of the requirements, so the specialized stretch code is the last one remaining, and becoming a climate leader community, which is a designation from the Mass DOER, the Department of Energy Resources. This opens up funding opportunities and technical support and assistance for municipal projects for climate action. And then the third action here is to review and revise existing zoning and policies to better enable climate-friendly zoning. So this would be making sure that nothing in the policy or bylaws are restrictive to solar or heat pump installation or other technologies that will help us get to net zero, whether that's through residential, commercial, or municipal efforts. So again, these are the 3 actions that kind of cross multiple sectors, but want to pause here for another Slido question just to get everyone's thoughts. Want to hear kind of if you're supportive of these actions, maybe you're somewhere in the middle, maybe unsure about some of them, but somewhat supportive. And then if you're not in favor of these actions, you can also indicate that. So I'll give everyone just a minute to open up your QR codes again. It should pop up right on your screen and just update on that same browser. So we've got 1 vote in support of. Great to see that. Another supportive vote. And if anyone's struggling to use Slido and has an answer that's different from on the screen, feel free to unmute and let us know. But looking like we have support for these actions. I know it can be hard to understand kind of the whole gambit of actions without having seen those, but we'll have a chance at the end to also discuss any gaps that might be missing from what we're proposing and here with our draft actions. We've got 3 supportive votes. Great. So with that, we'll move on to the next actions, which are for the building and energy sectors. So included here, we have increasing participation in the community aggregation program, particularly in the tiers that are available, which have higher renewable energy content. We also have another measure or action here to prepare municipal buildings to be net zero ready by improving energy efficiency, electrifying building systems, and installing on-site solar or procuring other renewable energy. So this action groups a few things together, but when it comes to buildings, we know we need to first look at how much energy they're already using and make them more efficient before we can right size HVAC systems that don't rely on fossil fuels. And then the third action here is enabling the use of the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy, or CPACE program, as a financial mechanism for commercial, industrial, and multifamily properties. So this requires the town of Millis to opt into this program. Really just requires passing it and formalizing that Millis is committed to providing this opportunity. And it's a statewide program that other municipalities have also passed or adopted into, but essentially gives another financing option for businesses and property owners. So with those three, we will once again check in on if you're feeling supportive of these actions, or have some concerns or questions about some of these actions. Great, seeing some support. We got 3 votes in. Great, and like before, feel free to unmute if you want to chime in on if you are supportive or not supportive, if you're not able to use Slido. Hearing none, we'll move on. Next to our mobility sector. So draft actions here include transitioning municipal vehicle fleet vehicles to hybrid or electric alternatives. There's the EV first policy in place through the climate leader community. So that kind of is setting the stage and developed a policy for that already, but actually executing that will be an important piece of the climate action plan. We have the transition to gasoline and diesel off-road or handheld equipment used for landscaping and maintenance. So this is electrifying other operations within the municipality, used for landscaping and DPW's other activities and operations. So while a smaller source of emissions, if we want to achieve net zero, we'll have to do it from all avenues. We're also including or proposing to include continuing the implementation of Complete Streets projects from the prioritization plan for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We've got many projects underway through that program already, and this would be to emphasize that that's an important piece by providing additional opportunities for alternative transportation modes. Another proposed action is to facilitate expanded access to electric vehicle charging infrastructure on municipal and/or commercial properties. So this could be on municipal lots or partnering with local businesses for access to charging on their properties as well. And this helps to create more opportunity for folks that may not be able to have their own EV charging, whether that's a lack of driveway space, or they have other electrical utility concerns, such as they need to upgrade their panel. So providing those opportunities, and also for visitors to Millis, that there's an opportunity for charging. And the last one shown here is to investigate the feasibility of a commuter shuttle or other public transportation options to better connect Millis with surrounding communities and existing public infrastructure or public transportation. Once again, we'll just ask for some thoughts here in the Slido program, if you're supportive, somewhat supportive, or not in support of these. Great, and we've got 3 supportive votes. With that, I'll move on to actions for natural resources. So the 2 we have included here are becoming a tree city by fulfilling the requirements. There's several steps there, so that's one thing that the committee is investigating if would be a good fit for Millis. And the second one being continuing to implement recommendations of the open space and recreation plan to protect, expand, and enhance conservation lands and public lands. And this is really around the ability to increase capacity for carbon sequestration and protect existing opportunities for carbon sequestration in Millis. Once again, a quick Slido question. And I'll mention that many of these actions are very municipal focused. So they're actions that the town and the committee can start embarking on to take action, to take climate action. And we will include some information in the plan about how residents and businesses can also take action. But this one specifically, the plan is focused on kind of the angle of what the municipality can do within its authority to implement these projects, policies, etc. Moving on to the waste sector, the 3 actions we have here are develop composting programs for schools, residents, and businesses. This could look like a variety of ways. It could be some sort of compost drop-off program. It could be a pickup program through like a curbside composting program. Many communities do it in different ways. So this would be investigating what a composting program could look like in Millis and taking steps toward a one that would be a good fit. Another action we have here is to expand diversion opportunities to foster a culture of repair, reuse, and waste reduction. So while waste makes up a small portion of the inventory, it's one that there still is opportunity for reduction. So looking at ways that we can divert waste from landfills and incinerators to other uses or for donation and reuse. And the third action here for the waste sector is to assess the transfer station operations and develop education and outreach campaign to improve the operations and the usability of the transfer station. Once again, with the Slido question here. Get some quick feedback from you all. Seeing lots of support for these draft actions. That's really great to see. And we've got 3, which is the number of people that have been participating throughout. So with that, I'll move on. And now we have our action for capacity building. So with all of these actions that we're proposing, we recognize that it will take staff time to be able to implement these projects and see them through, in addition to support from the committee, other municipal departments, outside community partners. It'll really take many hands at the table. So we're proposing in the plan to increase the municipal staff capacity to implement the projects identified here. And not only do that, but also to track policy and technology advancements, prepare grant applications, foster collaboration among other municipal departments and neighboring communities, and help that transition for residents and businesses as well. So we have Bob doing a lot of this work already, but with the need that we have for how much action we're expected to take over the coming decades to really meet net zero, more staff capacity will likely be needed. And we have one more Slido question. This is the last of the actions, so you won't see this Slido question again. But this is just the last one for if you're in support of expanding municipal staff capacity to be able to implement this plan and take that climate action more generally. And seeing support. Great. So with that, we're going to open up just for a few discussion questions. So want to hear from you all if there's any actions or ideas you feel are missing from the action list within each of those sectors. Again, emphasizing that this plan is municipally focused, so it's how steps that the town can really take, in addition to residents and commercial entities also needing to take action. But again, we have that kind of general action included here that the town will be able to support that. Especially with increased staff capacity, can do more community programming and projects to have that larger impact. So feel free to come off mute if you have any ideas around what might be missing here. We tried to come up with actions that were a shorter timeline that could be implemented in the coming years. But there are, of course, technologies and opportunities that might come up 10, 15, 20 years down the line that will help us reach net zero, but kind of as a first start, short-term list of actions that we can get started on. This is what we've been able to draft based on input from our first forum and in discussions with the committee and with cities or with town staff. If you have any that come to mind, feel free to put them into the chat. Or you can always reach out to Bob or myself at a later point. I have our emails at the end of the slides as well. If anything comes to mind, I know sometimes it can be tough to think of things after hearing all the actions that we're proposing already. But I see one person typing, so I'll give a minute. Great, thank you for the compliment. Okay, and one last question here, or we've got one more maybe after this. Just thinking about community partners, like who might need to be involved. It could be organizations that you're already involved with or that you know of that are active in the community. Because as I've said, it's not just going to be municipal departments, but we'll also need support from other entities as well. So this could be local Boy Scout troops or Girl Scout troops that have already been very involved. This could be other volunteer organizations, nonprofits that are present in the area. Could also be churches and other places of worship that have strong senses of community. Also, it could be all sorts of partnerships. So feel free to unmute if you have any in mind or put any in the chat. But this is some of the details that we'll be including in the plan. So not only the actions, but some key steps for implementation, the municipal departments that need to be involved, community partners that may need to be involved. And then we'll also be putting in some funding and financing opportunities and high-level costs associated with actions.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
And that is, we've got participants here who are not members of the committee. But I'd be interested if they're willing to share their thoughts with Bob on how important are incentives if you're going to make changes to your purchases for purchasing energy efficient items. And that's something, if you're willing to share it with Bob, I think we'd all be interested in. Sorry to intrude on your discussion.
No worries. Great questions. So I see we've got some answers here that
and
Scouts.
there are a lot of incentives with the Mass Save program, just right off the bat, for private owners and there's programs we mentioned CPACE, the program for private businesses that want to invest in solar on their buildings, and so there's a lot of the Mass Save program has been very successful. I don't know how it's worked in Millis, but I know it's been very successful over the state. So, and we're paying for it. You're paying for it whether you use it or not. So the best thing to do is to use that. And of course, the town itself gets a lot of incentives from utilities and from green communities.
Yeah, there's some great data from Mass Save on the savings by town. So that's something that we can include in the plan, is kind of information on to date or in a given year, the dollars saved by Millis residents and businesses from implementing energy efficiency and other programs through Mass Save.
I hear all that. I'm just asking those who aren't part of the committee to offer their thoughts. In other words, are you willing to consider an electric vehicle if incentives go away? If incentives are there, is that important to you? In whether you buy an electric vehicle, an electric lawnmower, lower cost air conditioners versus higher cost ones that have better, what is it, SEER rating or whatever. The point is, how important is that to the community when they make a decision? And I'd be certainly interested in understanding that.
Well, if anyone has any thoughts on incentives, feel free to chime in or put it in the chat. And I think with that, we will kind of open it up for any other questions or discussion items. I will just add here kind of our timeline for the completing this plan. With the draft actions, we're going to be developing implementation details, as I mentioned. So things like cost, who's responsible, who needs to be involved, compiling all of that together and creating our final plan. So the plan is funded by a grant, which is due in mid-September. So that's kind of the timeline that we'll be working toward. And there will be an opportunity for public comment. We'll put up the draft plan for review. We'll have that available on the Millis website. And I'll leave my contact information and Bob's contact information here up on the slides as well. In case any of these questions have sparked some extra comments or thoughts later and you want to reach back out. But we want to thank you all for attending today, and we'll open it up if there's any other questions or discussion items.
I want to just make a quick comment on what Pete was talking about with incentives. With any new technology, this is both professional and personal. With any new technology, incentives are huge to make a person make that jump from something they've known their whole life to some new technology. Is it going to work? Am I throwing my money away? What is this? How many miles am I going to get? Are there enough charging station? I mean, there's so many questions that without incentives, I don't think anybody would jump in. I really don't. You got to jumpstart this market. And that's money, 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 money. And then you can weigh, all right, if I lose $50,000, well, that's going to hurt. But if I lose $25,000 on a car that I'm not sure about, you might think about it. And I know for me personally, when I put solar on all my buildings, I never, ever would have paid that kind of money if I didn't get a payback that was crazy, beyond crazy. Even if they were lying by twice, I was still going to be ahead of the game. Never in a million years would I have made that leap. So I think that it's the game changer to open the market up. And then your neighbor gets one, and then you say, oh, okay, well, my neighbor got one, maybe. And then you talk and you start the conversation. So if these incentives go away, which they are slowly being nipped at because solar now is big, everybody's got it. So every year it's less and less and less. But at the beginning without it, I don't think we would be where we are.
Yeah, it seems really essential for those early adopters. And I think that's kind of how you kickstart it with the incentives. But I hear you on the like, they're starting to slowly dwindle. Like we saw a lot of like rebates when it came to like switching to LED lighting that are no longer, or you know,
Yep,
also kind of declining because everyone's already done that piece, or many people have already done that piece. So it kind of shifts as technology is shifting.
Yeah, to that point, you know, that 10, 15 years ago, the state was offering great incentives for investments in solar. And the industry took off in Massachusetts. And then the state came up with a different system of incentives called the block system and the smart system, and reduced the incentives. But because the industry had gotten so much momentum, it kept on installing more and more solar. So it's proof that we keep these incentives going. Eventually the market will take over.
Massive now they open turnkey for heat pump, it's totally free for the homeowners. Just need they have some type of money they make And that's big now, heat pump and insulation. That's, I think, the more invested right now.
Mhm.
Well, that's all we had for the presentation. We thank you all for joining us today to discuss the draft actions. And there'll be more information to come on those implementation details and the ability to review the draft plan.
Great. Cassidy, thank you very much for the presentation. And for those of you who are not members of the Energy Committee, we do announce our meetings, and we'll be following up most of the Energy Committee business. The next couple meetings will concern the Climate Action Plan. And again, I'm Bob Weiss, and I'm available. I'm the energy manager in town, so it's easy to get a hold of me. And unless someone from the Energy Committee has anything to say. In addition, I guess we will end the meeting here.
Thanks, Cassidy.
So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cassidy. Very well
Thank you,
done.
Cassie.
Bye, guys. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.